Hello and welcome, guys. So today I want to talk about the nation of Israel and the end times, and how we read certain prophecies in the Bible makes us think often that whenever we see calamity or wars or destruction over in that area of the world, that, we should have a certain perspective or understanding about how God's story is finally reaching its culmination. It causes us to associate that with potential darkness and difficulty all over the world, and we get a little bit of anxiety. And I think this perspective is a little bit off, and it's not based on what the story and the words of the scriptures are actually telling us to think and understand. So first and foremost, we have to understand what the whole point of Israel is, okay? Why did God choose a people and set them apart? What is their purpose? And this goes all the way back to Abraham in Genesis, when God calls him out and says, you know what, I am going to make a great people from you. They're going to be my people, and I'm going to do a great work through you to bless all of the nations of the earth and bring everybody back together who have been scattered in darkness and evil all over the earth since the Tower of Babel. And then in the prophetic books, there's so many verses and prophecies about a Messiah, a coming king that would one day lead Israel to that fruition. But what's also interesting is that coming Messiah in these prophetic books and the entire New Testament change a couple definitions that are really important to how we read the book of Revelation in the end times. And the first one is the definition of the actual border of what Israel is, what God's holy land is. And we see in Isaiah 49, it says, you know what? The nation of Israel, the tribes are too light of an inheritance for you, that I'm going to expand and make it the entire earth for you, so that my glory will be known throughout the world. And we also see later on in Psalms 2 that it says, I will give the nations as your inheritance. There are so many more prophetic verses about this concept where the borders of God's holy land and what is under his rule and what he considers to be the nation of God will expand from a small piece of turf in the Middle East to the entire world under Jesus. Number two, the definition of who God's people are is no longer just the hereditary natural seed of Abraham, but as we read about in Galatians 3, where it says, whoever is a follower of Christ, if you are Christ's, you are now a seed of Abraham. And Ephesians says that Gentiles who follow Jesus are now grafted into God's family. And then we also see in Romans 2 that says it is not one who is outwardly a Jew now, it is implicitly one who is inwardly a Jew, a follower of Christ. So we see that Jesus is now the king over all of Israel, over all of God's people. The Holy Land is now all of the world, and the definition is who is citizen of that Holy Land is whoever is a follower of Jesus. So given this, we now must read the book of Revelation and ask ourselves, when there is conflict or predictions or prophetic understandings offered up about what will happen to the Holy Land and God's people and Israel, what it's talking about is Israel and God's people defined as it has changed per what I just said about the New Testament, not just about a natural seed in a small piece of land in the Middle East. And this is really, really important, because then when you read the scriptures that way, you see yourself as having an active role. You see Israel and God's people being you where you live right now, and the battleground being a spiritual one. Our war is not carnal in flesh and blood, but is in the spirit, based on how darkness and anxiety and evil is covering the world in the place where you live. And by you overcoming and by you being a witness, you are playing a role in allowing God to work through you, as opposed to being a bystander looking at some place far across in the other part of the world saying, now is the time that God will end all of this. I'm just going to wait around and watch for that sign. Okay, with all that being said, what I am not saying is there won't be an official end times where things will culminate as the Bible predicts in a unique way. That certainly will happen. As Jesus said, no one knows but the Father. Every single generation has their own responsibility to look at the times and understand how the biblical cycles and prophecies are impacting their generation. Because I think if we all thought about it for a little bit, or let's say we all were able to live for thousands of years, we would see the current time we are living in to be not all that unique compared to other times in history. And so a lot of the biblical prophecies, especially in the book of Revelation, are cycles that happen over and over again that impact each generation. So we have a role to play in it. And that's what we will be judged upon. One day history will end and Jesus will return. And that will impact a particular generation at that point in time. But it's not as if the rest of us just have a false alarm or practice that ends up being futile relative to that particular generation. So, in summary, When you see natural things happening in the Middle East or the nation of Israel or wars happening, you should say, this is a clue to me in the natural about what's going on in the spiritual. I am a citizen of the family of Abraham. Where I am is the Holy Land, and these battles are not carnal but spiritual and are happening in my daily life. I am a king and priest unto God, and I have a role to play to impact this and to allow myself to be used by God. And I need to follow the scriptures and the Holy Spirit so that I make sure that I am participating in the correct way. And while God certainly does do things in the natural, they are signposts to what is happening in the spiritual. For instance, King Solomon built the temple, but was it the temple that lasted forever? No, it was Jesus' spiritual temple that is the one that is lasting forever, that is the seed of David. So many of the promises and prophecies about Israel in the Old Testament in the natural are fulfilled by how the definitions are changed to be spiritual ones by Jesus and the New Testament. We should read the book of Revelation with that understanding. You guys, I hope this helps. I hope this allows your anxiety and your identity to change a little bit about what's happening in the world right now. I'm praying for you. I hope you're praying for me, and I'll see you next time.